these endurance supplement companies are a bunch of dinosaurs, basically, right now, in my humble opinion. And
welcome to PricePlow.
All right, and we're back. So welcome to PricePlow. To PricePlow. My name is Mike, and I'm here with the Honorable Matt Mosman, who is an extraordinary endurance athlete, and the founder and I'm going to say founder and CEO of EndurElite, a sports
Chief Endurance Officer
of EndurElite, a sports nutrition company that's clearly marketed towards endurance athletes like yourself and like my former self.
Absolutely.
And so we just had a video where we're talking about Matt in general, introducing him, his history and his past. If you want to check his credentials, we'll make a link back to that video. But what I really want to talk about are, right now it is August 31st of 2018. I want to talk about the current state of endurance supplements and different supplements, different diet tactics, maybe if we have time, but different supplements for endurance athletes. And I suppose we should also have you preface this with like different types of endurance athletes, because some people consider them an endurance athlete, and then some people are ultra endurance athletes. So yeah, welcome back to the channel, Matt.
I'm back. Excited to be back. So yeah, like when we're talking about endurance athletes, like I think runners, bikers, swimmers, triathletes, like obstacle course racers, so more of like your traditional endurance sports. And I would even say like, endurance sports even fall under like that ultra endurance sports in terms of, like diet and nutrition strategies and whatnot. So yeah, when we're referring to that, I think that's kind of the athletes that come to mind. Now the current state of endurance supplements, it's actually pretty interesting. Like, the majority of supplements for endurance athletes right now, I would say, are sports drinks, gels, chews, waffles. It's not really what you think of when you think of like a typical supplement like the gym crowd is used to, right? I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and your brand doesn't have any waffles, I don't think, do you?
Ooh, I don't have any waffles, but those things are damn tasty. Like I gotta get me some of those. But no. That's what we're talking about, like in terms of like what most companies do now in terms of endurance supplements. And some of this is, some of these are good, and we can get that in a second. But a lot of them, like the main players, really are missing the boat. And I shouldn't even say this because I'm going to let them into a secret, but I will anyways. They don't really focus on like your true supplements, not true supplements, but like your typical supplements like the gym crowd is used to. So like things like caffeine and beta-alanine and beetroot powder and taurine and creatine. Like these endurance supplement companies are a bunch of dinosaurs, basically, right now, in my humble opinion. And that's what kind of they stick to, and that's what they're used to, and that's what most endurance athletes are used to. And so yeah, that's what I'd say the current state of affairs is with the current endurance supplement industry, and something that I'm really trying to change.
So you're gonna. It seems like you came, and people go watch this in the previous video. You came from a sports nutrition industry background where there's mostly guys, lifting in the gym, basically. Yep. But a lot of these supplements actually seem to work better for endurance athletes, than anything. At least a few of them do, depending on like how long you're training and everything. Yep. So it seems like you're taking some of that into this market that you are most familiar with, and you see that you're trying to disrupt it in a way.
Oh, absolutely. I'm going to raise hell on this, and I'm going to I'm going to get at people all angry about it. But yeah, things like, just take, for example, going back to caffeine, like probably at 90% of the pre-workouts in the whole bodybuilding gym space, I would say. Like what most people don't realize is like the majority, I would say like 95% of the majority of like evidence on caffeine is done in endurance athletes and shown to be most effective in endurance athletes, right? Mm-hmm. So, I think it's still up in the air if caffeine really does anything from like a weightlifting perspective. There's some research out there. It's not particularly strong, and if anything, it seems like the caffeine may have an effect on power and maybe a little bit of endurance, but the majority of the research on caffeine endurance athletes demonstrates like improvements in time to exhaustion, time trial performance, focus, memory, by various mechanisms that they think how it works. So yeah, it's just something like, that's just one example of like a lot of companies won't use it, like a traditional endurance company won't use it because they think caffeine is a diuretic and it's going to make your heart explode, which is total baloney. Like this whole like caffeine being a diuretic was based on a study done like back before the time of Jesus Christ, where this guy had like people drink like a cup of coffee or 12 ounces of water or like some greater amount of coffee, and he noticed higher urine output. Well, like, no duh, the guy drank like 16 ounces of liquid. What do you think's going to happen? There's like no significant differences between the water and the coffee. It's just, it's ridiculous. And this whole thing about caffeine causing your heart to explode, like, there's a lot of good research out there that shows like caffeine can actually lower heart rate during submaximal exercise. So yeah, you get all that people buying into that myths and baloney and bro science that, you know.
I wouldn't mind seeing that. I wouldn't mind seeing that study. I've never really looked into that, but
yeah.
But yeah, I think a lot of people will say like, okay, well, if I'm going for a crazy swim, and I know like I'm very familiar with my body and swimming, I know when I have a nice dose of caffeine, my swimming is way more on point. But a lot of people are thinking, okay, swimming is very difficult for a lot of endurance athletes. Heart rate's going like crazy because they're not as efficient and everything, and so their heart rate's already up. I think they're afraid to get their heart rate even more up from a nice dose of caffeine. And so I would love to see that study. Maybe we could put it in the description or the blog post with us.
Absolutely, yeah. I can send you the one on the diuretic and then lowering submaximal heart rate too. Yeah, it's not just one study. There's not a ton, but there's a few. But it seems to demonstrate that.
Demonstration, right? And so when you talk about so you are fine with selling caffeine. Now it seems like with caffeine, it is obviously a personal kind of thing, and in terms of like safety parameters, it does depend on your size. And I don't think you're going off into the unsafe ranges that are out there. But so how do you? When you're making, you're formulating a product, you're a relatively smaller, newer brand, and you can't have like all these different crazy, caffeine platforms on your product. So how do you formulate and how do you recommend to people the right dose of caffeine that you think will be good for their endurance sport? And given also that long question here, given also that there's a lot of different types of endurance athletes, how do I dose my caffeine differently if I'm on like a very long, whatever, bike ride?
Absolutely. I got an answer for you on that. And it's actually pretty easy. I mean, the way I formulate, it's always based on the evidence. So, but you got to make some like guesses as far as like what your consumer is going to be. But in general, like the majority of the evidence shows that 3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram body weight of caffeine is the sweet spot for improvements in endurance performance.
That's
like
a pretty big range, though.
What's that?
That's a pretty big range, though.
3 to 6 milligrams per kilogram body weight. It's a big range, but that's going to depend on like caffeine tolerance, body weight, and things like that too. So it can be highly variable based on that. And in some studies, the 3 does just as well as the 6, but everybody's so different. Some people have a gene that expresses caffeine in a different way where they react different to it. So you start with that, and then you figure that your typical endurance athlete is going to be probably anywhere from 120 to 160 pounds, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So you just kind of try to hit the middle ground as far as what's going to be the right dose of like caffeine anhydrous, or if you're going to combine it with like another form of caffeine like pure energy. So you like get that kind of kick of caffeine anhydrous right up front, and then you get an ingredient like pure energy that gives you a nice sustained release of caffeine and extends the half-life of it. So, with caffeine, your initial dose, you want to take anywhere from about 30 to 60 minutes before endurance exercise, right? Because caffeine in the blood reaches peak levels around 60 minutes. And then the half-life of caffeine is about 4 to 6 hours. So the amount you ingested will be about half of that after about 4 to 6 hours. So, with caffeine dosing at like an ultra type event, again, depending on the person, you're going to want to take another dose of caffeine anywhere from 4 to 6 hours in like an ultra endurance event. Keep on having that effect on your body.
And obviously it's smart to practice the way you want to play, and don't do any experiments on race day or whatever. Like, you got to know exactly when you want to time it up.
Especially with caffeine, because you don't want to do like a huge bolus amount of caffeine on race day, and like 10 miles in, you're about ready to poop your pants.
That's true. You got to know how you respond. Did you think of that one?
Yes. Pooping is not funny, especially.
Yeah, that was some of the things I forgot about since I haven't done like such a long thing for so long. That's great. Okay, so and you've mentioned pure energy a couple times. So is that in your formula? Might as well talk about your supplements right now, or at least like give you introduce the names and then kind of.
Yeah. So my formulas right now, it's basically a complete lineup. So there's a pre-workout, there's a sports drink, and there's a recovery drink. But with the Pure Energy, I put that in my pre-workout. So nobody's ever done like a true pre-workout for endurance athletes. And this is kind of how the idea of EndurElite started. So nobody ever did that. And we actually did, like we talked in the last video about my time at Muscle Farm, we did actually quite a few studies on Pure Energy when we were there with some really solid results in terms of endurance. So I was sold on it. So for the people that don't know, Pure Energy is a combination of caffeine anhydrous and pterostilbene, which is a blueberry extract. The ratios, let's see, what's the ratios? I think it's like 60% pterostilbene, 40% caffeine anhydrous. I could be wrong on that.
Okay.
But what they found is basically with all this research we did and the other research other people have done is, one, that extends the half-life of caffeine from like 4 to 6 hours to 6 to 8 hours. You're not going to get a terrible caffeine crash. You're going to get a nice release of energy without being over the top. And there's a lot of other cool stuff that it does as far as how fast and how, it gets into the bloodstream. So yeah, Pure Energy is one of those like specialty ingredients that we included because we know that, it works. And then the rest of the formula is composed of things that have evidence on there, not just something that was, again, like gave a rat like something to drink and this rat ran like for 2 days straight or some crap like that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, we've, as a previous researcher on our channel here has said, we've cured cancer in rats like 100 times. So we can.
Yes.
Sometimes you have to look beyond the rat research, of course, even though we do appreciate their contributions to the scientific community.
Yep.
So with the caffeine in your pre-workout, what is the total dose of caffeine if I were to like do the math on all that? And and then I'd like to know like if you have a preferred ratio of the Pure Energy to regular anhydrous.
Yep. So total amount of the pre-workout is approximately 215 milligrams.
Nice.
So that kind of hits like the sweet spot as like as far as what a typical endurance athlete would weigh or an average. Now they could like dose lower if they want less. I don't really necessarily recommend that because you're not getting the proper dosages of the other ingredients, but
right.
You still could. Now, as far as the ratio in the product, so I have 150 milligrams of pure caffeine anhydrous in there. So again, you get that immediate kick. Mm-hmm. And then I have another 150 from the Pure Energy, but you got to remember that's the 150 is part caffeine anhydrous and part of the pterostilbene blueberry extract. Jesus.
There we go. And that all adds up to 215. Okay, so
sure.
And then so people try to tweak it. If I'm going to have like a swim workout, I know that I would like to have that 30 minutes before for myself probably, and then enjoy. What I also like about some of those longer lasting caffeines, even if it's like an hour swim workout or whatever, I like to still be riding high after the swim because I got to get back here, get back to work and everything. So it's not sometimes I try to time it, and a lot of people be like, this is wrong, but sometimes I try to time it for optimal work. Yep. And not always optimal workout, but a lot of people would disagree with that. It just depends on what's the most important in your life sometimes. And hey, running a business, that kind of happens. Okay, so outside of caffeine, what else can we do for an endurance athlete that they might not know about?
Well, I think I can think of like 4 or 5 like the most effective like supplements for endurance athletes. But let's just like get the obvious out of the way. And a lot of people aren't going to expect this answer, but like hands down, the most effective supplement for endurance athlete is definitely, without a doubt,
can I guess?
Carbohydrate.
Oh, okay.
Without a doubt.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, caffeine is high up there. Like I would rank probably caffeine as the second most effective supplement for endurance athletes. I don't think a lot of people would disagree with me there, and I don't think a lot of people like in the scientific community would disagree with me that carbohydrate is the most effective supplement for endurance athlete. Now, a lot of people are probably saying, well, carbohydrates are food, you big dummy, Matt. And it's like, nuh-uh. You think about the stuff like we were talking about in the beginning of this video, the sport drink powders, the gels, the chews. Those are supplements, right? So, the majority of endurance athletics, relies on carbohydrate, and especially like as intensity gets higher and you rely on anaerobic glycolysis, that's the only fuel source your body can use for the most part. So, as an endurance athlete, for your diet, depending on, what your training's like, on a daily basis, you should be eating about 6 to 10 grams per kilogram body weight of carbohydrate, like just during the day to basically replenish muscle glycogen stores when you're all done. But then when you're out there like exercising, say on like a 2 to 3 hour bike ride, you're going to want to consume anywhere from 30 to 90 grams of carbs an hour, again, depending on intensity and duration. And where things get really funky is like with a lot of these sports drinks, a lot of people don't realize that your body prefers to have multiple sources of carbohydrate. Like it can only absorb like one source of carbohydrate up to about 60 grams an hour, right? So like a lot of people will use, maltodextrin, crap,
yeah.
and whatnot. But I mean, maltodextrin, it's not the devil, but it is. But they put like, they make
we
a
can do better.
That has maltodextrin as the main ingredient, 30 grams of maltodextrin for your carbohydrate, and people will go out and they'll exercise for 2 to 3 hours and like, man, why do I have this gut distress? Like, why am I feeling sick? It's because your body gets to a certain point, above that 60 grams of carbs an hour, where it can't utilize just one carbohydrate source. So your body's able to utilize up to 90 grams of carbs an hour, but you want to have a different combination. So like fructose combined with cyclic dextrin or just other combinations of sugar, so you can get more carbohydrate if the training or race demands it.
Is this commonly known? Because I've never heard that. Is it demonstrated by science?
It is demonstrated by science. A lot of research by Asker Jukendrup is the individual's name, showing this. And there's a ton of body of evidence out there, but like with most endurance supplement companies, they don't give a flying flip about the research. They just want to like push out sugar water and weird ass gels and stuff.
Yeah, maltodextrin is probably cheaper than sugar water. That stuff's like filthy cheap.
Oh Lord, yeah, maltodextrin, pennies on the dollar.
Yeah. Okay. So it's still a lot of carbohydrates. You're going out for a 3-hour ride. You're going to need, let's just say on average, 150 grams of carbs. You're saying somewhere in that range, maybe. A little bit more.
It just depends. Like if you were doing so let's look at it this way. If you were going out for under an hour, I wouldn't do any carbohydrate unless you just want something to drink on. Your body doesn't need it. You have enough glycogen.
Right.
Go out for 2 hours. Up to 2 hours, you can probably do 30 grams an hour. 2 to 4 hours, 60 grams of carbs an hour. And then when you get into that ultra endurance stuff, then you might kind of bump it up from there up to 90 grams of carbs an hour.
Gotcha. Okay. And so what in your products, I'm assuming you have carbohydrates. What is the carbohydrate blend that you've chosen and why?
So I use dextrose, fructose, cyclic dextrin, excuse me, potato powder, and rice powder. And the majority of that is made up of cyclic dextrin because cyclic dextrin is really high density, low osmolarity, meaning it gets in the gut, it passes through quick. If you do other carbohydrate sources in a bolus amount, like that signals the gut to send a bunch of water in there to basically digest and absorb it, and it just sits there, and that's where you kind of get that stomach distress. So yeah, with my sports drink, I have that 5 carbohydrate blend, which actually like a lot of weightlifters love our sports drink, even though it's meant for endurance athletes.
Right.
Like people love it because in addition to that, I have the BCAAs in there and then an electrolyte blend too. So it kind of covers everything. Like in the last video, I think we talked about BCAAs. BCAAs have quite a few benefits as it relates to endurance performance.
Okay. Yeah. And then the cyclic dextrin it's expensive.
Yep.
But it's very popular with that weightlifting community because a lot of people seem to get a better pump off of it when they're training. Like it's something about the carbohydrate getting to the muscle cell quicker or something like that. And and it seems like very few people have any type of negative effects with it. I've never felt bad on it, where I have felt bad on other types of things.
Yeah, and I'm not aware of any other like endurance supplement company that uses cyclic dextrin in like their sports drink. That just blows my mind. Like it's such a great ingredient, and there's research behind it too, which is it's really cool. Like in like swimmers and time to exhaustion and all this other good stuff.
Mm-hmm, right. So what about creatine?
Ooh, good question. So creatine, most endurance athletes have a negative stigma about it. Mm-hmm. But I would put it up there as one of the most effective supplements for endurance athletes, and for a couple different reasons. One, you think about what creatine does. It helps you basically rephosphorylate ATP, and ATP is your main energy source that is especially needed for like explosive muscular contractions. So you think like sprinting or climbing up something. And then a lot of endurance athletics, you have that moment where you're going to need to like sprint to the finish line or do a breakaway and things like that. And, you know, the creatine really helps there. So, you know, you take creatine, it saturates muscle creatine storage or creatine phosphate. And again, that contributes the phosphate group to the ADP to make ATP, and you have energy. So that's one part of it. And then another part of it potentially is creatine acting as an osmolyte too. It may help with like intercellular hydration. So in really hot and humid environments where some endurance activities might occur, you know, creatine could provide a really good benefit. So the one caveat with like creatine for endurance athlete is like, we all know creatine is well studied. It appears to be safe, but the one negative side effect, if you can call it that, is weight gain, right? Mm-hmm. So what I usually recommend, like with creatine endurance athletes, is you can get a lot of the good benefits of creatine without the weight gain if you do about 2 to 3 grams daily. And that seems to be the sweet spot. Now, if you don't care about the weight gain, then yeah, absolutely stick with the typical 5-gram dose of creatine and, you know, be an endurance athlete and then go to the gym and crush out something too. So,
right. I guess, does that little bit of weight gain offset, you know, if you're heavier on your bike or heavier swimming on your shoulders, is that weight gain offset the potential benefits that it would provide?
Well, then you're opening a whole nother can of worms in terms of like strength to weight ratio, really,
right.
And what that sweet spot really is, and that's, you know, there's a ton of variables that go into that.
Right. So you're saying,
I mean,
okay,
like I take 2 to 3 grams daily, and that seems to be good. Like
right.
I like it. I like the way I feel on it.
And I should know this, but I didn't look at the products this morning, unfortunately. Is it in any of your products?
It is not right now. Our plan is to make a standalone, just like creatine monohydrate product. And that way the consumer can add it to their recovery drink. They can add it to the pre-workout if they want to. And it just allows for a little more flexibility. And
that's what I was going to ask. If you're training for a triathlon, what and you do decide, you know, you look at the research, clearly I want to do some creatine, and let's stick with 2.5 grams per day, just like you said. What is the timing that you think is best for an endurance athlete?
I don't think, like, there, as far as I know, there's only been one study done on like timing of creatine, but that was done in weight training by the name of a guy named Jose Antonio, and he showed like creatine post exercise seemed to have the most effect on gains in muscular strength and mass. And I think those were the parameters they measure, but that's just one research study that demonstrated. You know, we talked before, like, research gets closer and closer to an answer. So studies definitely need to be replicated to demonstrate anything further. So for like my opinion on the whole matter now, and I think a lot of people would agree with me, is like timing to creatine, it doesn't really matter, honestly.
Yeah, that's typically what we write in our blog posts and talk about on these videos and stuff. But a lot of the people who might be watching this may not be as experienced as some of our other sports nutrition users who just, any time of the day, whenever is convenient. Some people like it pre, some people like it post, like whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, so I forget which product it was, but you did have some Peak O2 in one of your products, did you not?
I did, yep. The combination of Cordyceps and a whole bunch of other mushroom strains.
That's right. Can you explain that to the viewers? Like, why would you put in a mushroom extract into an endurance supplement?
Well, like Cordyceps as a whole is a pretty researched like supplement for endurance athletes, and Peak O2 just kind of like upped the game from just having like pure Cordyceps as a standalone ingredient. I mean, they have, what do they have in there? King Trumpet, Turkey Tail, the Cordyceps, and a lot of other reishi, a lot of other mushrooms I can't even pronounce.
Yeah.
Like, I fully admit that half these supplements I can't even pronounce. But, you know, the Pico 2 I was mostly sold on because there was research done at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hills by Abby Ryan Smith. And they showed some pretty promising results in terms of, like, improvements in VO2 max and peak power output. After, I think there were benefits after... Do you still see me, Mike?
I hear you. I don't see you.
Okay, hold on. So
come on back.
I'm sure you can edit this out, right?
I can, if I remember to.
Oh,
your face is. You should see your face though. Your face is stuck on quite a scene here.
Oh boy, there we go. Okay, good.
Hey, all right.
Welcome back.
I don't know if I'm gonna edit that. No, we'll see. Okay, so where were we? We were talking about mushrooms, Chapel Hill.
Yep. So, yeah, University of Chapel, North Carolina Hills showed that Peak O2 or demonstrated that Peak O2 can improve VO2 max, peak power output in endurance athletes. And that's what really caught my attention. There's been a few studies on it. And the thing with Peak O2, kind of like with like beta alanine and beetroot powder for endurance athletes. The more you take it, the better it works. So it's like a loading thing. But even after, I think it was like 4 to 7 days of Pico 2 at 4 grams daily, and I think there was another part that was 1 gram daily, started to show these improvements in these endurance parameters. So that's really why we included Pico 2 in our endurance pre-workout.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so some of our regular viewers will be sick of hearing this story, but I like to talk about it for anyone who's new coming from the endurance world. My story with Pico 2 is that I wear a heart rate monitor across my chest when I train, and I am very familiar with what different exercises do to my body, especially when weightlifting pretty consistently. And I noticed that when on Pico 2, the same like weight in deadlifts, for instance, when I'm on Pico 2, my heart rate is considerably lower, like 10 beats per minute lower after the same exact training. And so I like to use my heart rate monitor as a way to measure, basically the physical amount of work my body's got to do to keep up. And to me, it's like one of the easiest things to measure, to communicate with my body and get its feedback outside of how I'm feeling. And so it's like more of a mechanical thing. And for whatever reason, this stuff makes my heart have to do less work to get the same job done. Don't know why, and that's not necessarily endurance, but it could correlate to endurance because of that. So that's my story, and that's why I like Pico 2. It does add a little bit of like earthiness to the flavor, but at this point, supplement companies have gotten so good at flavoring it. It's like it's not negative. It's just not going to probably won't taste like candy anymore. But to me, the benefits definitely outweigh that little bit of negative, and that there's a little bit of earthiness to the taste. But
yeah, it just depends what you want to do. Like, I'd rather have like performance over taste any day. Like, if you can hit a happy combination between those two, like, I'm happy.
Absolutely, yeah, and it seems like your demographic are definitely the more hardcore endurance athletes who are on the same page as you.
Yeah, they're a little more crunchy, hippie individuals too, so they probably like the earthy taste.
Oh, yeah, that's true. Are they going to be mad when you call them crunchy?
Not at all, but my followers love me. They know I just tell it how it is.
Awesome. So you also have mentioned beta-alanine. What's the story with beta-alanine for endurance athletes? Very kind of controversial. It's like not unsafe, but controversial in that does it work for weightlifting is what we have to deal with a lot on this channel. What about you?
Yeah, I still think the research is a little bit conflicted, but along the same lines of caffeine, I think beta-alanine is probably a more effective supplement for endurance athletes. So, I mean, as you guys all probably know, like, it's not the beta-alanine that does anything. Like, when you ingest the beta-alanine, it's converted to carnosine. Carnosine is a muscle acidity buffer. So, like, when you endurance exercise and it gets more intense, the breakdown of, like, all the macronutrients causes a rise in hydrogen ions, causes muscle acidity, and carnosine basically buffers that in a sense, right? So beta-alanine most effective for like really intense bouts lasting about, if I remember correctly, 60 to 240 seconds.
Yeah.
So again, like things like breakaway sprints and things like that. But again, the research is, I mean, it's a little hit or miss. Like some research shows, it is pretty effective. Some shows no results. Some show, not significant compared to placebo. And who knows why? I mean, there's so many variables that go into play, like with a person's physiology and the type of activity and things like that. I mean, it's really hard to say. So, I mean, with like the beta-alanine, 3.2 grams daily up to 6.4 given range. I think beta-alanine, it's one of those ingredients you got to experiment with and see if it actually works for you. Like, I'm not absolutely sold on it. I think the evidence does point to it working, but I still think more research needs to be done, and there's probably been a ton of research done on it already. But I was reading through my sports nutrition book the other day, and I think it was one of like possibly effective ingredients.
Right. Yeah. Every study should always end with more research is needed. But yeah, I definitely appreciate the honest response there. And so, what doses have you gone with in any of your supplements? With it?
I always go with 3.2 grams because
going all in.
Yes, but if you give a consumer more of that and they feel like their face is going to melt, they tend to freak out.
Yeah, so and obviously our regular users know this. All the guys who've been lifting and everything, they know, like, we have beta-alanine in a lot of our pre-workout formulas. It doesn't necessarily need to be taken pre-workout, by the way, but and the studies showed that 3.2 grams, I think the best studies show they spaced it out throughout the day. So I mean, that's kind of tough to replicate, obviously. So a lot of supplement companies just throw it, like yourself, just throw it all in at once. Now, beta-alanine does cause some people to have a tingling sensation known as paresthesia, and it is a non-toxic reaction, but some people seem to freak out over it. Other people love it because, like, in the weightlifting world, people are like, oh, you know, they take their drink and then maybe they're messing around on their phone or whatever. The tingles is like the reminder, like, yo, this stuff's in your body, go work out. And so a lot of people do like it. But for those of you who are in the endurance world looking for a little bit extra kick, this beta-alanine stuff, it's controversial for multiple reasons, and none of them because it's unsafe, but more because, like, some people get the tingles up their neck and they freak out. Other people love it. Some people think the studies are good. Other people, you know, want more research and so on. But overall, it's to this point where it's been shown to be safe enough, and it's been shown to be inexpensive enough that it is definitely worth messing with. Now, one thing that we sometimes say is that if you have a high amount of carbohydrate in you, it might dampen the amount of tingles that you get from it. And given that endurance athletes are usually carbers, that might work out in your favor. And so I think I think there's like kind of a carnosine pool in your body. And so maybe for some people it doesn't work. Maybe, like, for whatever reason, they already have tons of carnosine and don't need any more, and they're kind of like maxed out or something like that. I don't know. Maybe you could speak to that. Maybe not.
Yeah, I mean, carnosine kind of falls along, beta-carnosine kind of falls along the same lines as, like, creatine. One, it needs to be loaded to be effective. So, like, beta-alanine, you need to load 3.2 grams for 28 days to saturate muscle carnosine stores. And on the same token, too, like, you couldn't eat enough meat unless you, like, go to a Brazilian steakhouse and eat, like, 20 steaks to get the amount of carnosine to, like, saturate carnosine stores. So kind of like creatine, like legitimately, to get 5 grams of creatine a day, you'd have to eat like 20 pieces of meat, which some people might be going, oh yeah, that's awesome. But carnosine's along the same lines. For it to be effective, like, I would highly, highly, highly doubt any individual can saturate their muscle carnosine stores through diet alone. It's something you have to supplement with, just like creatine.
Gotcha. Okay, so it sounds like something definitely to be added. When you mentioned beta-alanine, you also mentioned something else, and now I'm forgetting, though. What else do you have? What else do you like to rely on? Any other? You mentioned branched-chain amino acids. There might be some benefits there.
Well, like, in the whole hierarchy of things, so, like, so far we've talked about carbs, caffeine, and beta-alanine. But before beta-alanine, I would put beetroot powder.
Oh, that's the one. Yeah.
Before that. So most supplement companies use beetroot powder as, like, a coloring agent, right?
Right.
But beetroot powder is pretty darn effective and consistently effective in improving endurance performance. And again, it's one of those ingredients that will have an acute effect, but the more you take it and load it, the more effective it becomes. And the way that beetroot powder works is it's actually pretty interesting. I don't know if anybody knows the exact mechanism. If they tell you they do, they're probably lying. But somehow it lowers the oxygen and ATP cost of exercise, and it also decreases the breakdown of phosphocreatine. So it makes basically muscular contractions more efficient, and it makes harder exercise seem easier because it requires less ATP. Now, I don't know if this is due to, since beetroot powder is a high source of nitrates, and nitrates cause endothelial relaxation.
Right.
You know, that might be one of the reasons why beetroot powder works so good for endurance athletes. I mean, we're talking anywhere from like 5 to 15% improvements in time trial performance for some cyclists, but I would be lying if I said I knew the exact physiological mechanisms as far as why it works. Like, I mean, we know it's the nitrates, but, you know, what the nitrates doing to produce this effect, you know, who knows for sure.
But yeah, there are plenty of nitrate-based ingredients out there, but there's also just beetroot extract, which is it seems like it needs to be standardized for a high amount of nitrates. And there's of course we're getting a lot of stuff that might be untested or cheaper. How do you go about deciding on if you do want to go the beetroot method instead of just getting like a patented nitrate? How would you decide that? Because with a patented nitrate, I know or even if I was going to take like potassium nitrate or something, I know that I'm going to get XYZ, a perfect, percentage amount. With beetroot extract, I don't know what's going on back there. So how do you, as a supplement company, formulate and choose a beetroot?
Well, there's one of three things you can do with like beets. Like through your diet, like you can drink 0.5 liters of beetroot juice daily, which I would not want to do that. You can eat a ton of beets, or you can go with the beetroot powder, or you can go with the beetroot extract. Now, if you're dealing with like a beetroot powder by itself, the main thing is the amount of beetroot powder you put in, you want it to yield about 300 to 500 milligrams of nitrate. So you just basically figure out how, what you have, how much it's going to take to yield that amount, and that's how you do it from a formulation standpoint. Then it's all over the place. Like, I mean, the extracts, I don't know, like in terms of efficacy, like, I've heard standardized extracts from like 3 to 8%, but I would be leery to say if that really did anything from an endurance perspective. You really need to hit that like 300 to 500 milligrams of nitrate yield from the beetroot powder.
And is this more of an acute thing, taking pre-workout?
Yeah, beetroot has nice acute effects, but it's something, again, you want to take every day, like beta-alanine and creatine, and even like pico-2 to get a greater magnitude of effects.
Awesome. Okay. Now, what about taurine? We've been seeing a lot of good taurine research lately. Is this something?
Yeah, I saw that big meta-analysis come out a while back.
Right, we covered that. Yeah.
Yeah, with like, I think it was, I'm not super familiar with it. I don't think I had a chance to read it through, but I think there were some nice acute effects on endurance performance. But from what we know, or what the evidence demonstrates, is taurine can do a couple things. One, it can act as an osmolyte. It can act as an anti-stressor. And then it can also promote angioneogenesis, or the formation of new blood vessels. So, take your pick as far as which one that might be in terms of endurance performance. But like it's the sweet spot, like 1,500 to 2,500 milligrams seems to be the sweet spot with taurine. But yeah, that meta-analysis was pretty cool. Like I mostly thought of like taurine as more of like a chronic thing where you take it over time and it becomes effective. But after this huge meta-analysis,
there's enough data to show that right from the first dose, you're going to get some sort of benefits. So that's a pretty cool thing that a lot of people are looking to get after it. So at the risk of overwhelming people with too many supplements, I think we covered most of the main ones, of course. But what about betaine? Have you gone down that road at all and looking into that?
Betaine, I really haven't, not because it doesn't work, but because at least I'm not familiar with a lot of research done in endurance athletes on betaine. I think betaine's kind of along the same lines as taurine, a little bit as an anti-stressor and an osmolyte, if I remember correctly. And there's some research out there, like I forget what it is, maybe more reps, things of that nature, but betaine is not really something I've explored yet for the endurance market, and for no particular reason other than I would probably want to wait to see more evidence come out in endurance athletes.
Right, yeah. And the reason that's on my mind is Jason Challow, who put out the first study, 2.5 grams per day, led to a whole lot of more like the muscle parameters, let's say, that he put out another study recently showing that 2.5 grams per day in women had a lot of great results and better fat loss and all sorts of stuff. So I've invited him on the channel. Hopefully I can get him on, but I would like to just make a solo video kind of just talking about the research study he put out there. And so pretty cool to see that it's like you got the same guy who's been driving after this one ingredient for the last 4 or so years, maybe even a little bit more, and seems to be the expert on that. So I'll definitely ask him about that. But my question is, as it seems to work kind of similarly to creatine, and so I'm wondering if we're already taking creatine, are there many benefits in addition, and if so, like what doses and all that? So that's where we're going to be. So I guess subscribe to the channel. My shameless plug there. We're going to try to get into that stuff, and there might be some endurance stuff. So we'll stay tuned. But yeah, most of the research has been geared towards the aesthetic stuff and less of the endurance for sure.
Absolutely.
Right. Yeah, awesome. And so that should be a pretty good batch of stuff right there. What are we missing? Anything else? Anything that you're excited about? Anything in the future maybe happening? Or
I mean, yeah, just I'm just trying to bring a lot of innovation to like in the endurance supplement industry. Like out of all these years, like in our first video, we talked about my consulting gigs. I've taken a lot from each company I've worked with, and that's what I'm really trying to combine into EndurElite. So like, for example, with NutriBio, trying to have that quality and transparency, you know. And then with like innovation, the guys like Performance and Chris over at Inspired Nutraceuticals, like the innovation standpoint, and then like the guys over at Muscle Sport to like, you know, run a business in a good way and make a product appealing and look good and stuff like that. So all these things I've taken together to learn. That's my main goal. Like, I want to bring innovation to the endurance supplement industry that's beyond just like the sports drinks and the gels and, you know, the chews and waffles and stuff like that. I mean, will I do products like that? Yeah, because there's a place with like, you know.
That's what I'm thinking. You could do a gel, but then throw in some of these ingredients we're talking about and disrupt each individual thing with our know-how and all that, I guess.
Absolutely. Well, that's the exact plan. Like, I have zero interest in making a crap product. I have zero interest in like mimicking somebody else. Like, if I'm going to make something, like, I'm not going to put my reputation on the line just to put out another piece of garbage.
Awesome, Matt. Okay, cool. So we're gonna link to in the blog post and in the YouTube description. We're gonna link to all your channels. You have a lot of videos on Facebook. You put on YouTube, Instagram, all that fun stuff. Do you have a specific video that you think people should watch on your channel, that you maybe something recent on your head, or just like the go-to video, like to see like what's this brand all about, or just like a little bit more down this road? Do you have the one that you want to specifically link to or embed?
I'm going to steer you with, like, oddly enough, like, I shot over probably close to 200 videos now, and I think only in 5 of them I have talked about one of my products.
Right, honestly. Right.
So I'm going to steer people down a little bit different road.
Yeah, please do.
So they can get a good laugh, and I'm going to direct them to my Busting the BS video on Bulletproof Coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's a real gem.
Nice. And so the Bulletproof world, do you have a few minutes just to talk for a few minutes about this?
I have all the time in the world to talk about Bulletproof Coffee.
Oh, no. Okay, well, I was going to more go into so Bulletproof is obviously targeted, well, it should be targeted more towards the people who are high-fat dieters, looking to get a little bit more fat calories and less of the other calories, is my take. But how does that play into the endurance world? And I don't know if you covered that, like, part of your... if that was even part of your video, or if you're just attacking Bulletproof Coffee or whatever.
I was just bashing Bulletproof Coffee. Yeah. And it was just basically like on the fact of these like asinine claims, like increases testosterone, burns fat, like, and not just like, okay, maybe it burns a little fat and a little bit calories, but it's let's shoot it straight here. Like any effect you're getting, like, for the most part, in terms of like increases in RMR and like, you know, losing body weight, stuff like that. Most of it, feelings of well-being, all this other stuff people promote about Bulletproof Coffee. I mean, it's mostly from the caffeine, like, and they promote like all these healthy fats, like CLA. CLA doesn't do a damn thing for fat loss. These are the things that like keep me up at night. I just like get pissed about. I'm like, God, I just need to shoot a video on this because I need to get this out before I like do something. But yeah, I mean, like, I don't have a problem with like Bulletproof Coffee and some of these other fads. I have a problem when people start making all these ridiculous claims that people buy into. That's when I have a problem. Yeah, like, you know, keto or like Bulletproof Coffee, yeah, if you like it, drink it, man. I mean, if it helps you lose weight, it's not because it's a magic pill. It's probably just because you're consuming less calories throughout the day, more than likely. So yeah, if you like it, absolutely. Does it fit well within the keto lifestyle? Yeah. I mean, you have the MCTs, you have the butter, you have low carbs. And then, yeah, the whole, like, keto and endurance athletes, that might be a
separate video. But, I mean, here's my take as of right now. And you can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it seems extremely beneficial for ultra-endurance athletes who need to carry their energy on their body. And then everyone else... if you're going to do it, it's probably going to take a pretty sharp hit for quite a while unless you get adapted and very well adapted. And then it depends on if it's good for you or not. Some people just seem to be genetic ketone machines and other people aren't. But my take is ultra endurance athletes, I think it's a very smart idea. Everyone else, maybe not.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with you this. And here's not my big beef with, you know, being in keto, like, makes sense for the ultra endurance athletes because as a whole, like, your muscles can store, depending on what type of athlete you are, anywhere from like 400 to 100 grams of glycogen that can be used as energy, where like your fat pretty much like represents an unlimited like energy source. The thing I have with keto and where I get confused, and truth be told, a lot of people know a lot more about keto than I do, is I just always wonder about that point of inflection where your body, like on keto, makes that transition from burning fat to going on carbohydrate. So even if you're on keto, if you're on a ketogenic diet and you're an ultra endurance race, I would probably still incorporate some strategy in there to use carbs during the base carb load before.
Burst. Yeah,
exactly, because you get to a long grinder hill and you're on keto, like you're on a ketogenic diet, you're going to have absolutely zero anything in the tank when your body goes into anaerobic glycolysis, because anaerobic glycolysis wants glycogen, it wants carbohydrate.
Mm-hmm.
So in the research, there's decent research in endurance athletes in keto. My partner could speak better to this, but yeah, it seems like what you said, like the best applications seem to be in those ultra endurance type events. But the thing like with keto too is like, yeah, some people really like it, but man, I tried it and it is damn hard to stick to. Like that's my whole thing with it too. Like, not that I disagree with it, I'm a carb machine. Like I'll always promote carb, and the body of evidence suggests carbs are better for endurance activity. But who knows? Who knows what happens with keto and the ultra endurance and athlete? And you can read all the evidence and studies in the world too. But if you find something that works for you, it doesn't mean it's necessarily wrong, right? You don't have to rely on the science all the time. Field experience plays a big role in success too, in my humble opinion.
Definitely. I think we should, we should get a little bit deeper into that a little bit later. And overall, like what are the strategies for an ultra endurance or a longer endurance athlete who wants to be in this state of ketosis, but when do you spike in those exogenous ketones or spike in some carbohydrates to make it happen? Because I think that's going to be where the ultra endurance world can have some serious benefits, is having the best of both worlds when your body is just adapted to do whatever and you just give it the right thing at the right time. And so that's my personal take, and typically I like to let you close off with your personal take and everything, but I definitely thank you so much for joining us here, and excited. We'll make some links down to your stuff below, and to those videos that you talked about, which are definitely appreciated.
I'm gonna get in trouble.
Oh no, you're already in trouble. It's already posted.
Don't care.
All right, Matt. Well, signing off right now. Thank you so much, and you can subscribe to our channel. We'll make links. You can subscribe to EndurElite and find them on social media, and we will be linking to that video. Thanks again, Matt.
Hey, thank you.
Welcome to PricePlow.